Hey y'all, this is John and Shauna Kenney, and we want to welcome you guys to Quarantine Questions. Like I said, I'm John Kenney. I'm the senior pastor of Quest Church in Grovetown, Georgia, and my wife Shauna is with me tonight, and it is an honor and privilege to be with you guys and to spend this hour with you. The reality is that we're in a pretty difficult time in our country, a difficult season, if you will, and I don't know anyone that hasn't been impacted by the coronavirus in some way and this pandemic that's happening. So we know that it's affecting individuals, it's affecting marriages, it's affecting families, as we're all sheltering in place and doing different things and spending a lot more time at home. Couples are together a lot more. Obviously, families are together a lot more. And you know, there's some really great stuff that's come from that. With our family, we've enjoyed this in some ways, but in other ways, what has been so great has also been a challenge. So, you know, when something like this happens, there can be great benefits, but there also can be great challenges. So with that in mind, we were talking, Shauna and I was talking to the staff at our church, and we thought it would be a good idea to do a question and answer type of thing tonight for 1 hour. And what we wanted to do with this is put the ball in your court. And what I mean by that is we asked you to submit questions, and you guys submitted some amazing questions about marriage, parenting, and family. And so we're going to get into those questions tonight. I want you to know too, the format's going to kind of be, we really just want to talk. We have some notes and we've talked through this, the questions that you submitted, but we really just want this to be a conversation. So we don't have it all planned out. You'll see that as we're talking tonight and kind of going back and forth. So we want to address those questions that you guys submitted. And even if you didn't submit a question, I hope you'll stay tuned in, because I bet you are asking some of these same questions. If you're married or if you have kids, you're asking these questions and you would say, man, I could have submitted that question as well. So we're really glad that you guys are joining us tonight. Great questions, and we look forward to answering those in just a moment.
And we do want you to know this. We want this to be a time of encouragement for you. The things that you hear, we do hope will encourage you, give you maybe a fresh outlook or some new ideas, but also we want it to be a challenge for you. We want you to kind of move maybe from where you are, somewhere where you're struggling. We want you to just really take an honest look at things and see where, you know, there might be some things that you could change to do even better. And also we do want to say this. We know that not everybody who's watching with us tonight is going to necessarily have the same worldview that we do. And that's okay. And we're glad everyone is here and everyone is watching. But our answers will be born out of not just the experiences that we have in our family and in our home, but also out of a Christian worldview. And I do want to throw out a disclaimer that we are not experts at all. We are not trained experts in marriage and family and parenting, but we are experienced.
Yeah, we've been married. For those of you who don't know, and you may be joining us or somebody told you about this and you don't know much about us, we've been married 25 years and we have 4 kids. We have a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old, and 2 13-year-olds. We are so blessed. So it's been, an incredible journey for us. But this last month, like it's been for you, has, again, had a lot of benefits probably, but a lot of challenges. So we're going to get into that.
Yep, so we took some of the questions and grouped them together a little bit if they were somewhat similar. So you may not hear your exact question, but we're trying to reach everything that people put out there to us. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first question. It's about marriage. So it says, how do you maintain a healthy marriage during this time, especially when spouses are so different?
Y'all, I thought that was an awesome question. So again, the question is, how do you maintain a healthy marriage? And then it was during this time, right? During this pandemic, during being at home a lot more. And especially, I thought it was interesting that the question said, because we're so different. And first of all, I want to say this about this, and we're just going to kind of have a conversation about it. I think differences in spouses are more evident when you're together a lot more. And so one of the things that's happening is most of us, maybe not everybody, but most of us are spending a lot more time together. And so when you spend more time together, you're going to notice the differences. I mean, we notice differences, obviously, throughout our marriage. The more time we spend together, those differences become kind of magnified. And so we've all been, it's forced really, right? We've been forced. 2 months ago, nobody knew that this was going to be happening. So we've been kind of forced now to be together a lot more. And so it's like, I compare it to a magnifying glass. It's like now there's a magnifying glass on your marriage, and especially on the differences in your marriage. And so what happens is they seem bigger. The differences seem great and bigger, but the reality is they've always been there. We've always been different, right? Mm-hmm. But now when we spend a lot more time together, we notice the differences more, right?
Right, and I do also believe that another factor is that people are under stress right now. You know, everything's changed.
Yep.
Like you said, everyone's been affected in some way. And whether that's that your kids are at home all the time now, or you're not working as much, or, just the underlying stress of this whole situation that everyone in the world is affected by. It's there. And I don't necessarily think that we always understand the way that it does hold for us. And so sometimes things come out in a relationship like marriage or with our children, and we don't really know where it comes from.
Yeah.
But when we're really, like you said, all close together and spending lots of time together, it just has a lot more opportunity to come out as well. So.
That's right. I really think that's huge. What Shauna is saying is, when we've all been put in like the pressure cooker, if you will, and because of that, the things where you're different, and the question was about a healthy marriage, and I think, in my opinion, I tell people this, like especially in premarital counseling and things like that, I always get excited when couples are not the same, because that's a great opportunity to grow when you're not like the other person. And I know we kind of live in a world where we talk about everybody needs, you need to be compatible and things like this, but if you think about it, when you're really different, there's great opportunity to travel further, to love somebody, and to the fact that they're different than you stretches you. And honestly, we've taught on this before. The word in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, for oneness is actually the word completeness, is even a better term. When it says the two shall become one, which is always so weird. What does that mean? You hear it in weddings and stuff like that. It means that there's a completeness. And so if the other person's just like you, then there's not much more to complete, right? But when they're really different, there's more opportunity for completeness. I didn't even think about that. It wasn't in my notes. I just think, man, that's such a powerful thought to think that there's completeness and opportunity for that. But the other thing, like Shauna is saying, is we're just under such stress, and you gotta at least admit that and know that. I wonder, a great conversation thing tonight, if you're a couple, might be to ask the other person, your spouse, like, hey, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you right now? Another exercise, I've done it before with staff or other leaders, is take a rubber band and say, hey, if this rubber band represents your stress level, like how stressed are you? And when somebody's pulling that thing to it's almost about to snap, that just says a lot to you, and helps you understand, okay, my spouse is really stressed, and maybe you didn't even know that. Maybe you didn't know how stressed they were. Maybe they didn't express that. So when you realize that people are different, and it's causing struggles, right, in the marriage, here's what's required. I wrote this down. You know, what's required when there's differences that cause struggle is extra, you ready for this? Grace. Like, you've got to give grace. Grace is giving somebody what they don't deserve. So let's just say it this way. when Shauna's really seeing the differences in our marriage and how different I am, and I'm not meeting her needs and this kind of stuff, and she's struggling with our marriage not being healthy, she's going to have to give me extra grace, and I'm going to have to do the same thing for her.
We have lots of opportunities for that right now.
Are you talking about in our house?
Yes, yeah. Everyone does.
That's right.
So,
lots of opportunities. Amen to that. Like, there are lots of opportunities right now for extra grace. That's really good. Go ahead.
I just think, too, that we have to understand that everybody's going to deal with it differently. And so it is something that we need to talk about. And if you just as you're spending time with your family, just say, you know, you can ask, well, what do you miss about the way it used to be? Or what do you like about this? What don't you like? Or, you know, what are you saddest about? I think it's really good to just open up conversation about it with all of the family, so that we can we don't want to avoid the issue. There's something very strange and different going on right now, and so we just need to be really open about that.
Yeah, that's huge. I think one of the things Shauna and I have learned in our experience in marriage is that probably the best advice or wisdom we could give here is you've got to communicate. If you want a healthy marriage, and that was the question, especially when there are differences, but everybody I would think would say, yes, nobody goes, I want an unhealthy, awful marriage. People want healthy marriages. So if you want a healthy marriage, you're going to have to communicate. You've got to talk back and forth and share your feelings and thoughts and stuff like that. That's easier for Shauna than me. I have a harder time with that. But it has to be done. We have to talk. We've got to communicate. And that's true with your kids too, but that question here was about marriage. So you got to be intentional about talking. You've got to be intentional about communicating. And you know, one other thought is you've got to make sure during this time, if you want a healthy marriage, and this takes work. You guys know, if you know us, that we date. I've been dating Shauna for 27 years, 2 years before we got married, and then since we've been married, right? And we've struggled in the last month, and I think we've been on maybe 2 dates. I want to be real. We tell people they should go on a date every week, and our dates are different because you're sheltering in place. So it has to be something that you do at your house or whatever, or at a park if that's available and open, and we're allowed to do that. But I mean, we had a date the other day, and it was coffee and Scrabble. So we have to do those things. You've got to get creative and actually spend time. And people that say, well, I can't do it, I got all these kids in the house. Well, we have 4 kids in our house. So, you know, we get that. It's hard, but you've got to just get creative and make sure that you're spending enough time together. You got to have fun.
Yeah.
Got to have fun.
Have fun.
And you might go, it's impossible to have fun right now. Well, it's not. You can have fun. And you can do things together. So make sure that you do that. Hey, there was another question, and I'm going to kind of throw it into this one and let Shauna start with this, but one of the questions had to do with intimacy in this area. And so we want to address that because the question was about, you know, what do you do if spouses view intimacy differently? And that's almost a common universal thing, viewing intimacy differently. In fact, obviously, when I hear that question, I'm thinking of sexual intimacy. Maybe the question was about relational intimacy, and that kind of plays into this. But start talking about that. What do you do when you view intimacy differently?
I do think this question was more about sexual intimacy. And one thing that we always talk about is just how different men and women tend to be with this, or not always though too. Sometimes the roles are kind of reversed, but it seems like a lot of time there tends to be a partner who is more physically or sexually focused, and then another one who is more relationally focused. And we feel like God has made it like that on purpose to kind of draw them together towards one another. If I'm trying to reach out and connect with him emotionally, and just, an emotional intimacy, and he is trying to reach out to me in the sexual intimacy, then as long as we both meet each other in those places, it's like that's where you complete each other. That's where we have a more healthy and complete marriage. And so it is, I feel like we do need to be really aware of those dynamics going on, and be aware of what each other need.
I don't think I could have said this early on in our marriage, but one of the things I've learned is I was so selfish about what I wanted, what I needed. And I think one way to think about this is if your spouse is different than you, and they normally are, then you meet their need, okay? So you think less of yourself and your need, and you think more of their need. And so if I know what Shauna needs, and I know, there are times we talk, and I'm sure some of you have done this, and you go, I can't believe we're having this conversation again. And for me, I often feel defeated because I go, I know what to do. I don't know if there's any guys out there that can agree or that go, amen, I know what you're talking about. Like your wife talks to you and you're like, how many times have I heard this? And she's thinking, how many times do I have to tell you this, right? That's happened. And y'all, a lot of times I just go, I know what she needs. Now I need to meet that need. And here's what's crazy, and you don't do it for this reason, but when you meet the other person's need, typically your needs are met as well. And I think that's about, what that looks like in completeness. So that's really important. We're going to have to move on, but intimacy and intimacy issues and things like that. Also, another thing is to remember that your past experiences come into play. How you grew up, your family of origin, all those kinds of things come into play with how you deal with intimacy. But another big thing, we already said this, and then we're going to move on, but you got to communicate about it. And that is so hard. Intimacy issues are hard to communicate about sometimes, but you're going to hear that over and over tonight, is you've got to be intentional and proactive about communicating. You've got to communicate with the other person because that can be helpful. All right, we're going to jump into some parenting questions now. We're going to go back and forth. That's why we're trying to keep you tuned in. So we're going to address a few parenting questions. We had several questions about that. The first, and this didn't surprise me, is about technology and screen time. All right? I'm sure there's some parents out there that are struggling with their kids as it relates to technology and screen time. So here's the question. How do I parent my child when electronics and screen time causes them to have an attitude, become aggressive, and angry? What do you want to say about that, sweetie? You want me to get started, or do you want to? All right. So I think this is a great question. And again, I think a lot of parents deal with this. It's funny. We'll talk to our kids and we're like, man, we didn't even, they can't even understand that when we were kids, we're old, y'all. When we were kids, there was no such thing as screens, not like this. I remember my dad would pull out a video system out of the top of the closet. I think it was called Pong or Ping Pong or something. And once in a while we'd play it. And he'd have to hook it up to the TV, and that was screen time. So today, every one of us have a phone, we have a tablet, we have computers and all this kind of stuff, and there's so much screen time. Here's the other thing. There has been such an increase in screen time just because all of our kids right now are online for school. So not only do you have the regular screen time that you're dealing with, and this question has to do with what do you do when it causes anger and attitudes and stuff like that, which that happens at our house. We understand. We understand this question. But now they're online so much more because of school and that as well. So that plays into it, just the fact that they're online so much. We've had these issues in our house, and I will tell you this, it is super frustrating. I know Shauna gets really frustrated around this issue. I think that I'm the more lax one on it, and I think that even frustrates you sometimes, that I'm that way, or I can be on the screen too much as well. But it is super frustrating for parents, this screen time issue. We get it. And it can cause you to have an attitude and get angry and kind of lose it on your kids, which probably isn't a good thing, right? So we struggle with this. It's a constant issue. What do you want to...
I think one of the things we talked about is that, and this is why we struggle some with it, is the consistency is, with anything, is key. And it's very hard. We make rules.
Yeah, we have rules on this.
We don't always keep up with the rules.
That's
and
right.
I feel like I constantly have to remind my kids of what some of the rules are, because it's like there's a magnet in them that's drawn to the technology. And it just feels like sometimes every time you turn around, they're on something. And I know that this is an issue too for adults, that we tend to be models of that to them as well. So that's a big part of it too. But, I feel like it's frustrating. Part of what's frustrating is when we make rules, but then we don't stick to them. We're not consistent, and so then I'm just really frustrated with that whole situation. But this is really one of those things that I feel like we have to persevere in. We are the first generation of parents to parent children through
think about that.
This new age of technology, just of having so many things at their fingertips. Like we said, we didn't know what this was like. It was so different for us. I remember when we got a colored TV. Like that was a big deal when I was a kid.
You're really dating us now, babe.
Yeah. So, but it's one of those battles to me that's so worth it. And there are a lot of reasons, when I tell my kids, the biggest reasons in the end are, it affects your relationships, and it affects your creativity, and there are studies now that show that the more time you spend on the screens, looking at screens, you are more angry, aggressive, and depressed even. So there are, I tell my kids things like that. They don't agree with it. They say, it's not causing any problems. But one of the things I also, we've talked about, and there was a whole book about this called The Tech Wise Family by Andy Crouch, I think his name was. But he talks about how technology is easy. The easy thing to do is walk in the room. If your phone's laying out, or your iPad, or the TV remote's there, what do? You grab it. You turn on the TV. You start, scrolling through Facebook or whatever. It's the easy way out to just grab the technology and engage with that, rather than engage in other more creative ways or relational ways. And so that is, I think, the heart of why I struggle so much with it, because I want my children to be creative, and I want them to be relational, and I want our family to be that way. But I do, like I said, you just kind of need to keep addressing this, and it is worth fighting for. Technology is easy, and it's easy not to fight it. It's easier for the parents just to say, just kind of throw your hands up and say, I just can't deal with this anymore. Just be on your screens all the time, as much as you want. But there are effects for that. And I feel like there are a lot of things that we can do to help that a little bit. First of all, be consistent and try to stick to it as much as you can. Have other things available, or, like we've cleared out the coffee table right now and have a puzzle on the table at all times. Or just, initiate games with the family, or be outside. This is an awesome time for us right now. The weather is beautiful, and there are so many things that we can do outside. I think that we just want to try to make it so that technology isn't so easy. Sometimes I just want to hide everybody's phones and computers, or if you hide the remote control of your TV, nobody even knows how to turn on the TV anymore. So
I have an app for that. I can turn.
So the biggest thing though is I feel like, and I hope you do too, that this is just one of those things that it's worth fighting for our kids relationally, also with their relationships with God. You know, like if they're always holding on to a phone or a computer, texting their friends all the time on Snapchat or whatever, they are not, there's no quiet. There's no time to even hear from God. So I just feel like there are all kinds of things that they're just worth, it's worth pushing through.
Shauna said, I want to weigh in and just say, I love that about Shauna, because this is one of I have not backed that up enough. Just sitting here, I'm like, yeah, she's the main one on that. And, you know, I go along with it, but it's like, I love that she kept saying when we were reviewing this question, it's worth the fight. It's worth staying consistent. And I agree with that, because we want our kids to be creative. We want them to know how to have relationships and things like that. We're not saying that if you're on the screen, you can't ever have a relationship, but it's what they tend towards. It's easy. I love that, what Shauna said. And it's harder sometimes to have a real conversation. So this is one of those areas that you feel like I'm getting nowhere. It feels like quicksand. Don't quit. Don't give up. You should stay in the fight on this one, because it is worth it and it will make a difference. And your children will be different because of it. And the other thing, we know this as parents. Our kids think they know best, but sometimes they don't. All right, we know that they don't need to spend every waking moment on that screen. Mm-hmm. And so there's also tools. You ought to know the screen time and stuff like that of your kids. I mean, I can get it on my phone. There's things like that as well. My kids can't download an app, my boys at least, without me giving permission, that kind of stuff. So they text me at work. Daddy, answer me, right? But those kinds of things I think are necessary as well. But don't give up. It's worth it. Didn't you have a verse for that? I love from Galatians.
Yeah, it's Galatians 6:9. I can't remember exactly what it says, but it does say, "Do not become weary of doing good, for in time you will reap a harvest."
Yeah.
And I feel like it's not talking about parenting issues in Galatians, but it is. I feel like it's so good and encouraging for us to hear about that. That we have to. There are certain things that you feel like some days you're just banging your head against the wall. I really do, but over time, it really does make a difference, and you will reap a harvest eventually.
That's good. Scripture says, "Don't grow weary," and this is one of those areas that you go, "I'm growing weary." And it's really encouragement, because what it says is you will reap a harvest. Mm-hmm. So when you keep working at something, it does make a difference. And if you have young kids, let me tell you, I have a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old. So there were times that we were like, is this worth it? It's worth it. It is so worth it, because it makes a difference in their lives, and we're seeing that now with our kids. We really are, as they're becoming young adults. It's amazing. So hey, another parenting question, then we'll get back to some marriage questions. And this is similar, but how do I deal with my kids constantly arguing and fighting with each other? I was so surprised that people would have that going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially right now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's such a great question. That is something that would happen anyway, but I think during this time when we're sheltering in place and in our homes, you're going to see it probably a lot more. So, Shauna, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, I would say, we tend to, when we see something kind of blowing up with our children, which we do a good bit.
At dinner.
Yeah. Just remember that what you see happening on the outside is really just like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more going on inside of the child with their heart. So, like in a moment, like at dinner when something's out of control, someone's out of control, or, wherever it might be. I feel like it's appropriate at that moment to deal with the behavior, to correct the behavior. But don't, and I'm not saying you have to do this every time you correct a behavior, but it is important to address the heart with your children too. Why did you do that? What was going on with you tonight at dinner when you said that or you did that? There's so much more, because what we don't want to just have kids who act properly, but inside their hearts are just, in chaos and dirty and just full of sin. We want them to be children who really are internalizing the things that we're talking about and learning as we study the Bible with them and as we spend time in church. And we want this is an opportunity really for you to really apply some of the things that y'all have been talking about and learning. We had one of our children say, and around this, middle school age, I just wish that everybody knew what was going on inside of us. Speaking of this, their peers, the kids at this age, like in middle school especially, there's so much going on inside of them. They're really trying to figure out who they are and figure out life. So we have to help them do that. That's one of our biggest jobs as parents and as followers of Jesus, to figure out who they are too as believers. So spend time one-on-one, with them, going back to those things that you've, really take time to get to the heart.
I love when we started talking about this question, Shauna mentioned this whole, I want to repeat it. And I wrote this down when she said it. Remember when this is happening, when you see whatever blowing up in your house between siblings, that what you are seeing on the outside means that something's happening on the inside. I thought that was just because I'm telling you, sometimes all I see is the outside, and I just want to correct that behavior. And what Shauna is saying, and is so true, is whenever you see something on the outside, that's a sign that something's happening on the inside, right? And the inside is the heart. And our children's hearts matter more than anything. So if they leave us at 18 years old and they act right, but their hearts aren't right, have we really done what we need to do? So addressing the heart is so very important. We had a situation just this week with something like that, and I think it was at dinner, and it was great, and it was at Shauna's initiative, but man, we brought them in one by one and talked about it and addressed it later. And I think that's always good. Like, we dealt with hey, stop that, you got to do that, you got to stop behavior sometimes, or correct behavior. But if you can take it a step further, that's what we're saying is really important. Don't just correct behavior, address the heart. And that might be the way to say it, is correct behavior, but then address the heart. Just thought of that. Like, correct the behavior, and then when you have the opportunity, and it's usually not right there, you kind of got to get them one-on-one, address the heart.
Also, it's hard to address an issue when someone's really emotional, though, about
that's
it,
right.
too.
Or other people are there, they get embarrassed
Right.
and stuff like that. So, and I also said, I wrote down too, just a note about pray for wisdom on that. Like, do you ever stop and pray as a parent? Like, Lord, give me wisdom right now. I don't even know how to address this. I'm about to lose it myself, whatever. Pray. Lord, give me wisdom. I need wisdom on what's going on with my child. When your kid is struggling, when your teen is struggling, when your tween is struggling, whatever, praying for wisdom is really important, and then listening to God so that you can know how to address it. We had one question on tweens specifically. That's a whole new age, right? 4th and 5th graders, I think. Tweens, Tweens, about picking battles. So Shauna wanted to address that too. It kind of goes with this, but it was like, hey, how do I know when to pick battles with my tween?
Yeah, I was thinking as far as, stopping to pray for wisdom. Adolescence, when you're dealing, when you have children who are in that period of life, it's really hard. That's when you do have to spend a lot of time praying. And it's not bad. It's just hard. And, for adolescents, I guess I feel like that's kind of between 10, 12, 13, something like that, 14 even, where it's a stressful time for them. Because I think I talked about earlier, like they're trying to figure out who they are and how they fit into this world and how they measure up against other people. And so it's a really stressful time for them, which makes it a really stressful time for parents.
Yeah.
But developmentally, what is going on with these kids is that they are, like I said, trying to figure out who they are, and they need to walk away from us as parents in order to be able to do that. They have to distance themselves, become more independent. This is when peers become huge in their lives. They have to just get away from us. This is normal, but it hurts parents too. The way they respond to us, they act like we have no idea what we're talking about. They just act like that, they're too cool for us. They don't want to be around us. This is all normal, though it's hard. But I just want to say in those times, it is a very emotional time. It's hard, and sometimes it's honestly kind of almost hard to even like your child. Of course, you always love them, but sometimes to feel like you even, want to be with them, it's hard. But I would say to always work to keep a connection with them. They're going to push you away, but don't let them. Don't say they don't want me in their lives anymore. That's not true. They do want you in their lives, even though they probably don't act like it. They do. They still need to have their home and their family to be a safe place for them. It's like they need to be tethered to parents still. They need to be connected to us so that they feel safe to go out in the world and figure out who they are and where they belong. So I would say, with these picking the battles and stuff, you do have to be careful, and you don't want to be fighting all the time. So you do have to pick your battles, but I would also say be creative in how you even address certain things. Like everything doesn't have to be a battle, but you can still address certain things. Like, you don't have to say don't do that, or you don't have to say I don't have to tell you this again, but you can just find more positive and creative ways to say things, and give them choices too. You can stay up late tonight and watch more TV, but then you're still going to have to get up early in the morning, to do your schoolwork, or just give them a little bit of leeway, but at the same time, so they kind of feel like they have some control. Give them a little bit of control, but also you kind of have to temper that too. But one last thing I would say is try to just be really proactive and intentional about creating positive interactions, because it can feel like a lot of times everything you do and interact, every time you interact, it's something negative. So really, I feel like you have to put extra work into trying to make those really good, positive, fun times together.
That reminds me of the times when we've taught on, when your kids are younger, you tend to parent, or you parent with authority. You have to. And as they get older, authority turns into influence. It's harder to parent, and some of you may disagree, but I'm just telling kids what to do and correcting behavior and things like that as they get older, we need them to start being able to make the choices themselves. And so sometimes, and that was really, I remember with our oldest, when we, can I do this? And you go, I don't know, do you think you should? And so then you're influencing and giving them a choice, and it becomes different. Because sometimes they don't make the choice that you'd want them to make. But if you gave them the opportunity and they make a choice, and you got to let them do it, and you got to let them suffer the consequences if there are, or whatever. So I do think probably as kids get older, there are more pick your battle things. Would you say that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, when they're younger, it's kind of, nope, I got to correct that. I mean, you got to kind of stay consistent. I'm not saying you're not consistent when they're older, but I don't know. You just tend to go, is this really worth it in the long run? it's okay sometimes to influence, and if they don't choose the same thing or what you would have chosen, that's okay. Because then if they make a mistake, you can talk about it and have a conversation. That's good. All right, we're going to ask a couple more marriage questions. Man, y'all asked some great questions. This one I felt like just powerful. It said this: I feel like I'm taken for granted. And actually, this wasn't, I guess, just about marriage. It was probably about family as well. But it says, I feel like I'm taken for granted. Everything I do for the family. What should I do to let others in my family understand how I feel without pointing a finger? And I was like, man, what a great question. And whoever asked that, I just want to say, wow. And because it's a humble approach that you're taking. I love that the question itself is asked in humility. I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not trying to judge people. I don't want to accuse people in my family, but I just feel taken for granted sometimes. And that can feel like a selfish thing to even ask, and I want you to know it's not. It's okay to ask that and to feel that. I mean, I think a lot of people feel that. Shauna's going to share a little bit here at the end personally about how she's felt that before. But again, I think a lot of us have felt that way. Like your spouse maybe takes you for granted, your kids take you for granted in the family. It's a tough place to be. I think there's 3 things to think about with that question. All right, so you're asking, what do I do if I feel taken for granted? How do I talk to my family about it? First of all, I think it's really important to be aware of your feelings. Self-awareness is huge. And so whoever asked this question, you're aware that you're feeling that way. So that's good. But there may be other people listening to us that right now, as we're speaking about this, going, I feel taken for granted. So all of a sudden you're aware of your feelings. That's a good thing. That you feel that way, that you understand that's what's happening in you and to you in a sense. So be aware of your feelings. Second, this is hard sometimes. Realize that you don't see everything. You see your perspective. And what I mean by that is maybe Shauna feels taken for granted, right, at a certain point in our relationship and family. She may not even know that I feel the same thing. And so that causes, like, she's feeling taken for granted, I'm feeling taken for granted. That makes us distance ourselves from each other because, darn it, she doesn't appreciate anything I do, and darn it, he doesn't appreciate it. So awareness of your feelings, but then awareness of other people. Like, what's going on in their lives, especially when you're not with them all the time or whatever. Right now, we are with each other a lot of the time. And then thirdly, and we've already said this, you got to share your feelings. So be aware of your feelings. Realize you don't see everything that's going on. Other people have feelings and thoughts and things too. And then you need to be able to share those feelings. You've got to communicate about this in a healthy way and in a healthy environment. It's not good to just blow up. I always teach this in premarital counseling. Approach is everything, right? We know. I think Shauna's definitely learned in our marriage, like with me, certain approaches, like I just don't do well, and then other approaches I do great. And I've grown over time so that I can kind of handle any approach, if you will. But approach is really important. If you go in, it's just usually not good. So making sure that you share your feelings in a healthy way when you're able to do it, in a calm way. We really believe there's never a need for cussing or cursing at each other, anything like that. That's just not appropriate. Even yelling and things like that, it's not healthy. It's just not. And so if that's where you're really not communicating or sharing your feelings. You're just saying something, but you're not saying it in a healthy way. So that's really important, and that can be tough. And I know some of you may be in a relationship where some of that's happening. You're not selfish for feeling this way. I said that. Go ahead and share kind of personally what you were going to say as well.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that for years, I've stayed home. And so sometimes being home, not being out working and that kind of thing, it does feel like a lot of the things that I did were taken for granted. And, sometimes just unnoticed even, like not even necessarily taken for granted, but so unnoticed. And sometimes I just kind of felt like I had totally lost myself. So I feel like for me, as I worked through it, there were two parts to that answer. And one was that first I had to really kind of figure out that what I was doing, first and foremost, I was doing it for God. And it was, a privilege, and I got to do all of those things, and really what a blessing that is. And and I'm not saying I know that's like the churchy answer, but that's only half of my answer. But it's true that if you really think about that, all that you get to do and all the blessings that you have, and that He sees you and He notices you, even if nobody else does, He does. He blesses you for that. But then the second thing was, too, I had to learn to speak up for myself. I think women a lot of times expect their husbands to read their minds, and men might do this too. Expect your wife to read your mind, but we can't do that. We know that creates a whole lot of frustration if you just expect them to know what's going on with you. So I had to kind of just speak up for myself and voice my needs, and even be proactive in myself, meeting some of my needs. Like if it was to go out and spend time with some friends, or take up a hobby, or just get some time all by myself. I think that is one of the key things, is just to know that you are not selfish in needing that, and that is something that really you've got to do. I just really I feel like that was maybe more of my struggle than anything, and maybe that's the struggle of the person who asked this question, was really like, I kind of feel like I've lost myself, and I just need to find myself again. I don't know, but it really is. It's good for you to have something that you're doing, and something that you're doing that's different from all the things that you do. You said, I think everything I do for the family, and I think it is good to have some other things that you can just be involved in. And
I remember when Shauna started voicing some of that, I was actually somewhat surprised, and I think it was because she thought I should just know this, like she said, and I really didn't. And sometimes you think if the person acts like things are okay, they're okay, and sometimes there's stuff going on inside a person. So one great thing I was just sitting here thinking is, if you're a couple, maybe you should ask your spouse tonight, here's another homework assignment, hey, do you feel taken for granted? Ask the other person, instead of expecting them to share it with you. Just say, are there times you feel taken for granted? And hey, if you do, this is an opportunity when somebody asks that, to share your answer.
And, and ask, what do you need?
Yeah. And where have I taken you for granted, and that kind of stuff.
And just remember, approach is everything.
And don't get all defensive, y'all, if the person starts sharing and you ask the question. Because you ask them, and however they feel is valid. You don't get to tell a person how to feel. That's how they feel, and it's valid, and we need to make sure we say that. All right, here's one other. We're going to do this one a little bit quicker, but how do you deal, this is a marriage question, with a big disappointment together as a couple? Man, was this the one we were going, I don't think I've ever been asked that question.
Right, yeah. Disappointment.
As a couple, when there's a big disappointment in your life, to get, like in one of you or both of you, something happens, and there's a huge disappointment. How do you together deal with that? I was like,
and that can also be like stress or loss or anything, not just disappointment. Like, how do you deal with something that's really hard together as a couple? Yeah.
I love that you asked the question, because it infers that you know that there's a we aspect to this. And that's the thing about marriage. The reality is you're two individuals, yet you're also together. And so there is the me, there's Shauna and John, me and me, but then there's we together, right? And one of the things that we always like to say is, we is important in marriage. Whenever Shauna has something, It's we. Her thing is not her thing alone. It's we. It might be hers, but it's now mine too. So if she has a disappointment, it's my disappointment as well. I'm a part of that. So the thing about this is you deal with it as an individual, that's for sure. And be okay with the fact that you might deal with it differently. You may not agree with the way the other person's dealing with it, but then you have to come together. And one of Shauna's words I like it, is team. Like, we're a team. I remember she started saying that in our marriage. And it was more like, we're not a team, is how it would be said. And she wanted to be a team. I want it to be we, us together. So just remember that team is important. The we is important. Though you'll deal with things individually and differently, you also deal with it together. And both of those are important. And I think you have to communicate. Again, we keep talking about communication. If you don't, this is really important, hear me. If there big disappointments or stressors or something like that can cause a couple to distance themselves from each other so much that you end up splitting up, separating, or even divorced. It can happen because as you take steps away from each other, you're distancing yourself from each other. So you have to communicate no matter how hard it is. When you communicate, imagine this. If you don't communicate, you're going like this. If you do communicate, you're going like this. What do we want in marriage? We want movement towards each other. And so you've got to communicate.
You could talk to friends and other people, especially women might want to go and talk to friends, but I feel like, and that's good, that's always important and helpful, but then I think you make sure that you talk to your spouse about it.
Yeah, that's good.
Because this is, like you had said, together, this is us. We are one. So
that's right.
So we need to also work through it together.
That's good. All right, a couple more parenting questions. We're getting towards the end here, but I like this one. I'm a planner. I had the whole summer plan. This is very specific about the pandemic. I had the whole summer planned for my teen. That way he isn't just sitting around the house. Now that everything has changed, I find myself obsessed trying to figure out what the summer will hold. Trying to find peace is hard right now. What advice do you have? So you had your summer planned and now nobody knows. This is a great question. I like it because I'm a planner. So I identify with whoever asked this question. All of us as parents, if we have kids, are probably struggling with summer plans. We have one that was supposed to go work at a camp. We don't know what's going to happen. That one came home from college, doing online school right now, but living in the house. That was not planned. I mean, and so whenever everything blows up like it has right now, this is like worst case scenario for planners. Mm-hmm. Like, if you are a planner, you're going, amen. We are in worst case scenario. And I'll tell you, I understand because, as the pastor of Quest Church, this has been I don't know what to do, right? And we're trying to do so much, and I appreciate the encouragement and prayers and things like that, but I will tell you that because I'm a planner and I can't plan anything, this has been really, really difficult for me. So it's a perfect storm for those of us who are planners. Shauna said, well, hey, maybe this is a time God is stretching you. Oh, I love that answer. Us planners are like, and the reason we get frustrated is we know it's true. And I'm not saying God caused a pandemic or anything like that, but what I'm saying is in the midst of this, God can stretch a planner when your plans are interrupted, right? It's a learning experience. Anything else you want to say about that part? I thought that was huge. Yeah. I love that.
No, and I just was thinking, if you think back to other times in your life when things did not go as planned, and when one door was closed, then something totally different opened up. So I feel like, yes, it's not what we expected. So we're just going to have to be open, I feel like, to new and different things. We don't know what that is. And it is kind of one of those things. You just have to be able to, get used to this, get comfortable being uncomfortable. This is where you're going to be for a little while. It's fun
for us planners to hear that, sweetie. Thanks so much.
And, I feel like the pandemic has also helped us all to see how much we are not in control of our lives. And that's a very hard thing. especially for a planner. So it is an opportunity to grow.
I wrote down 3 things on that, and that was one of them. Like, just as a planner to another planner, with what you asked, we are less in control than we thought we were, right? That's what one of the things I've learned. Flexibility is required, and you may hate to hear that, but it's just true. If you need to know the plan, here's for the person who asked the question, you will not have peace. If you must know the plan, then peace will not be available, because right now we can't know the plan. You just can't. And then thirdly, and this sounds so trite, trust God. It sounds so trite, but here's the thing. It can truly happen right now for you. If you're a planner and you don't feel peace and you don't know what to do this summer with your kids, this is a chance to trust God. And as much as I say that, you see it when you're planning and okay, yeah, trust God. Now you have to. That's all you have. So I know those things are hard, but I think that they're possible. All right, here's the last question. We're going to close with a couple thoughts. Our young daughter is asking me, how is God the Father of Jesus, but God and Jesus are the same? How do I explain this? I thought that was awesome, y'all. We've had this over and over in our family. Big theological questions, and there's other ones as well. You know, if Jesus died, that means God died on the cross. How did that happen? How was he dead but alive? You know, and you're like, go to sleep, son. Or first thing we would say is it's great that your kids are asking questions, especially big theological God questions. We encourage questions. It's okay to doubt, things like that, right? That's important. Second, you don't have to have all the answers. And that's hard sometimes when we feel like we want to know all the answers. Sometimes I say to my kids, for real, I say, when they ask me something, and I know you go, you're the pastor of the church, this is my answer to them. That's a great question. I wonder the same thing. I've said that to my kids. It's often putting them to bed. And they're okay with that. Like, wow, buddy, that God is big. That's one of the things we talked about, right? Like, how big is God? That's a really good question. About that. I wonder the same thing. And that was the third thing. God is so big. God is mysterious, right? Mm-hmm. You want to share on that some?
Yeah, I just...
Not too much time.
Yeah.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I just feel like we do have to help our kids understand that God is so big. And there are a lot of questions that are going to go unanswered. And this is for adults, too. We struggle with the same thing. We want to be able to have answers. It makes us feel like we're in control. But we're not, again, as we talked about in the last question, we're not in control. God is so much bigger than we know, and we're never going to fully understand him. So I feel like while it is uncomfortable not having the answers, it's okay to not have all the answers, and embrace that spirit of your child. That's what I love about who we call Doubting Thomas in the Bible, where he had to see the scars on Jesus' hands to believe. And
Jesus showed him. He was okay with that.
Right. Everybody else is like, I can't believe you, Thomas. But Jesus was like, oh, look,
it's
see?
Okay. Look,
and he would very patiently understood that Thomas just needed to see a little bit more. He was asking questions. He was trying to dig deeper and find out a little bit more. And I think that's what kids are doing when they're asking these questions. And, it's okay. Even the pastor doesn't know all the answers. So,
I think it's a great thing you say when your kid asks a question you don't know is like, that's a great question. I wonder the same thing. That's one of the best things you can say, and then talk about for the person, and we're going to close here in a moment, but the person who asked this question, this is a Trinitarian question. You asked about God the Father and Jesus and how are they the same. There's also the Holy Spirit. So you think of God the Trinity, right? He's big, he's mysterious. This is one of my favorite explanations. I do want to give you something you could share. Maybe you could say to your child, hey, when you think of the Father, he's like over us. Like over there, up, right? He's over us. When you think of Jesus, he was with us. Like he walked with the disciples. He walked on this earth. He was with us. And when you think of the Holy Spirit, he's in us. And you could even put your hand on your child's chest there and heart and say, he's in your heart. And so when you talk about God that way, you go, he's over us, he's with us in Jesus, and he's in us by the Holy Spirit. Wow, how big is he? You know, that's just an amazing thing. It blows my mind. I don't fully understand that at all. So to say
he's all the same.
He's all the same. He's in
different but the same.
Yeah, he's 3 in 1. I mean, they're asking you a deep theological question. I think it's just great your kids are doing that. I encourage kids to do that. All right, so final thought. I don't know if you guys have noticed kind of a theme tonight. We noticed it as we were putting together these answers, that we feel like one of the things we're saying about marriage and parenting and family and all of that during this pandemic and when this is over, okay, is you've got to be proactive in marriage and with children, not reactive. I teach that in leadership class. Be proactive, not reactive. Great leaders are proactive, not just reactive to every situation. And y'all, that's work. And I'll tell you this, Shauna has been saying that for longer than me, that we need to be proactive. We need to be intentional is her word. And it's work. I was like, this is so hard. This is so much work for our marriage. She would say, we need to work on our marriage. We need to work on our family. And I'd be like, oh, it just exhausted me thinking of it. I have come to the place that it is absolutely true. She was absolutely right. That marriage is work, and family is work. You smiling over there. Family and parenting is work. It's not for those who don't want to work, y'all. So marriage is work, family is work. And if people sometimes look at us and go, man, you guys have a great marriage, I go, it does not just happen. It is work. Our family, whatever, it is work. Whenever you're around people that have a great marriage or great parents and kids and stuff like that, it is work. So at our house, I brought a sign. This is in our bedroom. A friend of Shauna's gave this to her because everybody who knows my wife knows I call her the queen of intentionality. It's all about being intentional. So that's really what we're saying with all of these questions. Be intentional, be proactive, don't just react, but be intentional. That is the end goal. Whatever you want for your marriage, whatever you desire for your family,
whatever is important,
whatever you want,
make it happen.
Make it happen. Be intentional about it. That's what we're saying tonight. And I think whatever question you might ask, think about this. If you have other questions or we didn't answer all the questions, this is probably part of the answer to your question, is to be intentional about it. And whatever you want, go after that. And especially go after it together if you're married. So Shauna's going to close us in prayer. I do want to say this. If you didn't... If you had a question you asked and it wasn't answered, you are welcome to email me or message me. We didn't get all of it in. There were a lot of questions, a lot of great questions. We tried to group them together and stuff like that. If you have more questions, we're keeping the link up. It's thequestonline.com/myquestion. You can continue to ask questions because we want to be able to, and we're going to try to respond to those in some way. And speak with you. Maybe we'll do something like this again. I don't know. Let us know if this was good. I don't know if anybody's watching or not, but I hope that it was good. All right. So Shauna's going to close us in prayer, and it's been so good to be with you guys. Again, honor and privilege. We miss you. We can't wait to be with you. We love you guys. Thank you for letting us come into your homes and share tonight. Why don't you close us in prayer, sweetie?
Okay. Lord, we just thank you so much for being our Father who is with us, leads us and guides us. I pray that you would lead and guide each one of these people who is listening tonight, that you would help them in their families, marriages, with their children, to be able to be followers of yours who are truly walking in that every day, and taking those opportunities to learn and to grow and to be more like you. I just pray that you would give us lots of patience and lots of grace, especially in these this time. There's a lot of hard things going on and lots of change. Lord, just be with us. Pour out your grace and love upon us and all these families that are with us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Be intentional. It's been great to be with you guys. Good night.
Good night.
Wait for the delay.